Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be entering the exciting world of using a multimeter. Oh, yeah. So a multimeter, in terms of why is it called a multimeter? Well, a meter measures things, and then this measures multiple things, hence being called a multimeter. So we, of course, use this for electricity, though. So this is an important tool that, honestly, you could probably use for possibly the rest of your life. It's a great tool to have, relatively inexpensive, but there are, of course, expensive versions. So you can get like an inexpensive version for like $10, and that usually is good enough for using around the house or as a hobbyist. And then there's, of course, versions that cost $100, and then there's pro versions which are even higher than that. So in terms of multimeter, in terms of what would you use it for, it's really good for diagnosing issues within an electrical circuit. So if you think about, well, how many things do you use that have an electrical circuit? There's just all kinds of them. So this is a great tool to use for, we call it like diagnostics. This is a great tool for diagnostics. That means trying to diagnose issues, trying to find problems. So if we take a peek here, so this lesson series, there's a couple different lessons here we're going to go with, and the ultimate goal of these lessons is to give you some information to help you be proficient with using a multimeter. We want you to be able to measure voltage, measure resistance, check for continuity, measure current. Those are the big things that we want you to be able to do and know how to do, and then you're going to actually apply this in class. You're going to actually do it on circuits, and then when you do some soldering, you solder up some of your own circuits and so on, you might find that it might not work, so then you can use a multimeter to try and diagnose your issues. So if we look at our lesson here, for lesson 1, we just wanted to kind of do a basic intro to the multimeter and answer some very basic questions. So in terms of general care of the multimeter, so if we take a peek here, right now, the leads, notice the wires, we call these, the ends we call the leads, but the wires, it's all wrapped up nicely around the multimeter. That's how the multimeter should be put away when you're in class. The multimeter should have this case on it. That's just nice in case it drops and falls, so it protects it a little bit. Other things in terms of general care. So when I'm ready to use it, I will very carefully unwind, because if I yank too hard on these wires, they might fall apart. They might even break, those types of things. So we want to be careful with that. And then one of the biggest things that students neglect to do is they'll use it in class. Maybe they use it in class fine, but then they forget to turn it off. So then they'll actually put it away, and then the numbers will still be up there. They won't switch it to the off. That is a problem. If you notice this one, it says the battery's low. The reason why that's a problem is because it just wastes time and it wastes resources. So your job is to be responsible. Make sure before you put it away, flip it to off. The screen should then turn off, and then very carefully wrap it back up. So wrap it back up, turn it off. If you ever get one that the battery is dead, you can let me know. I will most likely have you change the battery, and the case comes off, just comes off the back, and then on the back side, there's a couple screws. You take those screws off, then you can get at the battery, change the battery. That's about it for that. Let's take a look at our next questions. Now, the leads. Where should the leads plug into and why? So let's take a look at this. So the leads, we got, I'm just going to pull this red one out for now. We got the black one in the center hole. So there's 3 holes. The black one, we put in that center one. If you notice, that center one says COM. I believe that stands for common. A lot of times the ground is called common. When I say the ground, I'm of course talking about electrical ground, not the ground that you step on. But electrical ground, we would call that the negative. The ground, the negative, the common. So when we are talking about negatives, we generally use the color black for negatives. You know, it depends on what you're doing, but for our multimeters, we're going to use black as the negative. That one should always stay there. We should never really ever have to take that one out. So make sure you look at your leads and make sure they're plugged in the correct spot. Now, the red, of course, then the red we generally think is the hot or the positive. So if we look, we have 2 different spots here. This one says 10 ADC. So what this side is, that's going to be like if we're going to use more current, 10 amps. That's a lot of current. That's like something like your refrigerator barely uses that much. So like that's measuring a lot of current. And then if we look at this side 200 milliamps. So if we're measuring like around that type of amperage, then we can plug into there. Notice it says fused. So that means when we run this side, we run through this side, we're measuring current. There's a fuse inside of this multimeter. And that's there, of course, so the multimeter doesn't break. But what happens a lot, if you get a multimeter and you're trying to measure current and it's not giving you a number, that probably means that the fuse inside is blown up, and we might have to then open it up and change the fuse. So just keep that in mind. So in general, we should really be just keeping those two leads in these two sides. In class, we really shouldn't need to be measuring something with this much current, but if so, ask and talk with me before we go switching that kind of stuff or doing those types of things. Let's look at our next questions. What do the symbols represent, and how do you know which number to switch to? So let's take a look here. What do these symbols represent? If we look, this one here, it's a V with a straight dashed line and a dot, dot, dot. This is DC voltage, direct current voltage. And then if we look at this side, this is if we have alternating current type voltage. So this is like what would be coming out of our walls. But this is, in general, in class, we're only going to really be using this side for voltage. So again, this is DC voltage. If we look on this side, we look at that symbol there. You should know and recognize that. That's our omega symbol. So that's for ohms. That's for measuring resistance. So if we look at this green section here, if we look at this speaker, this is like a speaker. You can kind of see like the sound waves coming out, and then this red area here. This is to check for continuity, which just means is the current, or can current flow through? Is it connected? So it's similar to resistance in a way. And then if we check on this side, we can see amps. So we got the A symbol for amps, and we really shouldn't have to be going down to this 10 amps. If we do, then we really need to switch to this side so we don't damage the multimeter. So mainly going to be using over here. So now in terms of how do you know what number to switch it to? Well, you might not. So you're going to have to play around with that a little bit, and it depends on what you're measuring. If you are measuring a 9-volt battery, well, that has, in general, 9 volts. So if I look at the multimeter here in direct current, because that's direct current, so 9 is higher than 2, but it's less than 20. So, and it's definitely less than 200 and less than 600. So I need to put it higher than the low number. So I need to put it closest to the number that's just above it. So 20 is above 9. That's 20 is way closer than 200. So I'm going to switch. I could switch it to 20. I just want to introduce you to that right now. Once we get into these other lessons, you'll see a little bit more specifically how that works and what that looks like. And what happens is if I switch it, if I'm measuring something and if I switch it to the wrong one, the number up here it might look kind of goofy, and then that will tell me then, hey, I need to switch up or down or something like that. So now I'm going to test you real quick. I'm going to test you on what do each of these symbols mean. So first one, what is this symbol? What does this have to do? Or what would you be measuring or checking with this symbol? Next up, what would you be measuring or checking with this symbol? What would you be measuring or checking with this symbol? And last one, what would you be measuring or checking with this symbol? Two more things to point out to you really quick. This hold button, if we are measuring a number, we could press that hold button and a little H pops up there. What that means, that's kind of nice. So if we are measuring something, let's say we're underneath a car or something like that, and we're measuring, and then we push the hold button, it will hold that value. So then we can then take the multimeter, maybe write on a piece of paper or something like that, or just because it's easy to forget whatever numbers show up on here. So when we push that hold button, it'll hold that number, and then we'll again we can more easily remember what it is. A problem that I often see is people will have the hold button pushed down, and they'll be trying to measure something and the screen's not changing. So if you ever see that, that means you just got to turn off the hold button. There's also a backlight button that lights the screen up, so if it's in a dark area or something like that, you can see that. So again, that's just some of the basics. Thanks for checking this lesson out.